We're living in a time of exponential change. There was a time when human development was local and linear. A grandmother and her great-great-great-granddaughter could expect to live more or less the same life. But technology is speeding up things today. And a grandmother and her granddaughter will live radically different lives because of the speed of technology. And so when we think about what has happened with technology, just in my lifetime alone, we have gone from technology being something that was mostly for academics. Then it was ubiquitous, slowly but surely in our homes. It influenced our behaviors. And by the 2000s, we were all feeling pretty cool. Explosive, uncontrolled technology was everywhere. And today, most of us are living fully integrated digital lives. I can't tell you how excited I was just this week to get my Apple Watch for the first time. And I thought, why am I so excited about that? I still am not entirely sure, but all of us have a relationship with technology now. A relationship. It's causing a lot of mental distress, and certainly COVID has accelerated mental distress, recessions, inflation. But even before COVID, the mental distress in the United States was profound. You see a particular band in that area of the country where I'm from in Appalachia, stretching from the top of West Virginia, bottom Pennsylvania, all the way down through Natchez, Mississippi, and New Orleans. And Raj Chetty, the famous economist, points out that children who are born into poverty, the likelihood they will ever come out of poverty in their entire lifetime. Again, we see a very red band indicating that that is not likely to happen. Then we look at the chronic health conditions and who in the country was the most impacted by those chronic health conditions. We see the same pattern occur, but if we go back in time far enough, we see where the original story began. We become the stories that we tell, and those stories have profound implications for our systems. In 2014, we were in Natchez, Mississippi, and Natchez was the second largest market of enslaved human beings pre-Civil War. And we were down there, Josh and Hannah and I, we had been brought down there, or Josh and I were, and been brought down there by a Fortune 100 healthcare company. And they had been there working for a year of all the things that they were going to do to this little Mississippi town to make its population healthier. They brought us down the week before as an artist team because artists are only good for prettying things up, of course. And so we get down there. The first thing they do, they hand us a binder about this thick. And it's got strategies. It's got tactics. It's got all the things that they are going to do, this Fortune 100 company, this little Mississippi town. So the day arrives of the launch, and there's everything in the community health playbook we had thrown at it. There's the fun runs and the Zumba walks, everything, healthy cooking demonstrations. And as it's all being set up in the park, I see this older black lady sitting there, and she reminds me quite a lot of my grandmother, and I spend my morning hanging out with her. And so after a few hours, I got ready to leave. And before I left, I asked her, I said, what do you think about all this that's being set up in the park? And she got a big smile on her face. She said, well, those are nice people. And it's clear to me that they believe they're here to do something real important. But she said, no, that's going to work, though. And she started telling me about a recipe card that she had. And she said, if I looked at it on the street, I'd keep walking by it because it's stained and it's torn. And I wouldn't think a second thing about it, but it is the most prized possession that she has because it's written in her grandmother's handwriting at a time when her grandmother being able to write was a problem for some of the people that were still alive in that town. And the first ingredient, she said, is a couple cups of lard. And she says, just because those people's numbers tell them they need me to eat a piece of kale and walk around the block a time or two doesn't really make me want to do anything different because they're missing the point that I'm not making food when I cook that. What I am doing is connecting to my identity, who I am, in the line of a lot of strong black women in my family. Change, she said, can never be about just one thing. If it is not about everything, and at the same time, most people will tell you what you want to hear. but they're not going to do anything about it. The World Health Organization has identified the systematic neglect of culture and healthcare as the single greatest barrier to the advancement of the highest standard of health worldwide. Identity is a cultural question. We talked yesterday about mirrors and windows, that what we see when we look in the mirror, as Verena so beautifully sang this morning, is not what others see when they look at us. We all bring our lifetime of experiences to what we see when we look at each other and at our reflection in the mirror. So these questions of identity, what do they mean for economic development? Well, for the last 50, 60 years or so, we've pretty much had our system set up. You get your education, then you go to work, and then if you are lucky enough, at some point in the future, just as your body begins to maybe give out on you, and you can afford it, you can go try to enjoy your life. Well, that really never worked for the population. It worked for the systems that built these. And so as we think about Gen Z, which we're going to talk a lot about today, we think about how they are not even thinking about one company, let alone, they're thinking about different entire industries and all the places they want to go and explore, and thinking about why are they doing this? Because access to technology has, again, collapsed time and distance. The idea of taking an idea from a garage band in Pittsburgh and a spice they read about in Morocco and something that they are thinking about from Finland, they can do in 30 seconds and always have been able to do it because it's at their fingertips. Time and distance, just like a plane, just like the train, just like the wheel, time and distance has disappeared. This is what we often miss with innovation. Innovation is a culture change. Innovation changes our perceptions of time and distance from each other. It changes our perceptions of space. And so as we think about workforce development, talent development, economic development, what if our systems were set up to manage identity transitions? Grade school to high school to college, retirement. All of these things are identity transitions much more than they are just moving from one job to the next. And so the goals of the Imaginator Academy, we went through yesterday, I'll just briefly review them again, is to future-proof innovation through culture. We believe in quantitative cultural analytics. I can't tell you how many conversations I'm in where I talk about culture and I talk about data. And then as I'm getting ready to end the conversation, somebody I'm talking to, especially if they're coming from higher education, will say to me, guys, oh, that's really great that you're doing all that qualitative data. Well, yes, stories. We're all doing qualitative data all the time, but this is quantitative data we're talking about. And that's because quantitative data helps us to determine what's possible. Stories are the only thing that change the world. The only thing. But in today's world, especially in the private sector, it is data that makes those stories believable and investable. So the way we do it is we've harnessed from across organizational psychology, management, neuroscience, public health. We've harnessed what works to save time, energy, and effort for companies that are ready to make the move. And then the reason we're doing it is because of courageous imagination. There's 3 key human experiences that we focus on. We like to think about these things as connecting the head, the heart, and the hands. Earlier this year, I got the chance to go through a design sprint with Scott Galloway. Some of y'all may follow Professor Galloway, Professor G. And in that design sprint, he raised something that I thought was really interesting. He said, look, there's only really a few human instincts that drive everything. And I didn't really fully understand what he was saying at first, but then he started talking about it. And one of the examples he gave is that instinct we have to know the unknowns. It's the first time one of us stood up and looked at the stars, saw a shooting star, and wondered, what's that all about? That instinct to know the unknown has been with us since the beginning of time. Don't think it matters in business? Well, let's think about this. And this is what Dr. Galloway points out. So as organized religion was beginning to decline in the 90s, that's the same time the ubiquity of technology was beginning to rise. And as those two things crossed, it shifted culture. So what used to be perhaps a prayer, God, will my child who has this disease survive? What happens? Hey, Google, will my child who has this disease survive? So these two cultural intersections began to shift and change our human behavior, but not our human instincts. So these instincts are powerful. They think about Facebook, the belonging instinct. Now, whether it makes belonging or not, we all know that it's problematic, but it taps into that instinct. And there's the instinct we have for freedom, that instinct that we have to have autonomy and self-determination in our lives, but then also to be able to use that self-determination, to join with others, to do more than we can do alone. When people talk about e pluribus unum, out of many one, most people conjure up the concept of the pyramid that's on the back of the dollar. Well, the pyramid was introduced by Franklin Roosevelt. A pyramid is a hierarchy. It represents freedom from something. But e pluribus unum originally is on the other side of the back of the dollar bill. If you look over the eagle's crest, there's 13 stars, a constellation. Not freedom from, like in the pyramid, a hierarchy. Freedom with. Just because one star glows, another star doesn't get dimmer. So as we move into the world ahead, I think this idea of freedom with each other, rather than freedom from, is an important thing for us all to consider. I'm not going to get too much into the science because we went heavy into this yesterday, but the cultural intelligence that we put together has profound implications. We've pulled together 7 or 8 scientific disciplines. All the metrics that you see back there on the science board of the quantitative data we're collecting all have predictive capabilities to them. Then in the Denver algorithm, that's what our work is today. And this afternoon, we have an incredible design sprint that InWorks, Dan Greiner and his team have been working on with us for a couple of weeks now. Really excited about that. So be sure you save some energy for this afternoon because we're getting ready to do some work to create this Denver algorithm. I just want to review very quickly the 5 things we talked about yesterday. So as we talk about building collaboration capital, the hands, there are 5 things that do this when you boil down all these different areas of research. 5 things help us build collaboration capital, the ability to work across our difference. It is social connection and mental well-being, trustworthy media and storytelling, analytics that people can use, generational alignment, and environments for creativity. We're not talking about teamwork. Teamwork is a good metaphor for collaboration, maybe, and it's been one that's been our primary one that we've used. But when you're talking about teamwork, you're talking about sports, you're talking about a winner, you're talking about a loser. I want to suggest to you that today that we begin to explore what other metaphors exist out there. The theater is a great one. In theater, you have a group of people contributing their individual talents. There's not a hierarchy in theater. It's a group effort. And it's only completed when that group sets the stage and shares that with an audience who then feeds back to them the energy. Every single person in the audience having a different experience, but it's same and communal at the same time. Theater, the stories we tell have been with us since the beginning of time. The very first theater person group, the very first storyteller, was also the very first futurist. So we're going to be exploring this afternoon the stage principle, setting the stage for collaboration. Social connections and mental well-being, trustworthy media and storytelling, analytics that people can use, generational alignment, and environments for creativity. So let's assume we get the collaboration in place. Then there's 4 barriers that we have to overcome. Just to remind us from yesterday, we talked about those 4 barriers. The things that cause us to dig in our heels. The yada yadas, our overwhelming desire to stick with the status quo even when we know it's inadequate. 2, the blahs, that physical, mental, or economic exertion, real or perceived, of what it's going to take to make this thing happen. The feels, those unintended negative emotions that arise in us all from new ideas. And 4, the side eyes, that who do they think they are mentality. People's aversion to being changed by other people. These are the things we have to overcome. Then if we have those belonging situations in place, if we've overcome those things, if we've created belonging, we have collaboration in place, then there's three things that creativity science tells us that spark the novel ideas, and that novel idea that we're able to turn into value. Whether or not novel ideas produced by a particular individual or group, let's just say an LGBT employee group, has a very different lived experience when they come into the workplace. So if you have an LGBT employee group, they may have a novel idea around how to reframe a question, how to find a solution that others who have not had to have that experience of developing that cognitive flexibility through years and years of code switching that they've had to do. A Black employee group knows about this. A lot of us know about this, right? But whether or not that novel idea becomes enterprise-wide value creation depends on skills, resources, but importantly, the motivations of the people who have the novel idea and their perceived alignment of their motivations with that of the organization. If the people who have the novel idea perceive that there is not alignment of those things, that sits as latent capacity in an organization never to become enterprise-wide value creation. So these three areas of creativity. And then if creativity, belonging, and collaboration are in place, then there's really only two things that matter from there. And that's the stories that we tell about what we're innovating around. I have a dream. Own your power. Think different. Love wins. Si se puede. Yes, we can. These are stories that shape what we believe to be possible and valuable in our lives and in the future. These are stories of courageous imagination, of self-determination, of freedom. The stories we tell determine the outcomes we experience. And then finally, it all boils down to one thing. The one thing that binds us all each to each other, and I spoke a little bit about this yesterday. I was so inspired by the Chamber of Commerce current chair, George Sparks, who's also the CEO of the Nature and Science Museum. He reminded us at the Chamber luncheon this year that, my words, not exactly his, that everything in this room was created from stardust. Everything that we call an economy, that we call a school, that we call a nation, that we call technology, was created by stardust. The things that come from the earth and human imagination. Both those things are stardust. They're the thing that binds us together. Stardust is our origin story. So as we think about these beautiful images coming back from the Webb telescope, I've been fascinated as I've been watching social media, because it's a rare occasion on social media where you see people step down from trying to prove what they're wanting everybody else to believe. And it doesn't matter if you're a public sanitation worker in Durango, Colorado, a tech CEO in Salt Lake City, or a child in a public schoolroom in southeastern Kentucky. These images take us all to a different place. They connect us because they allow us to see the commonality that we have. Our minds, our cognitive biases are wired to define difference for us. We're wired to do that. But these images also open up space. So how is it that an image can create space that makes us feel more connected, and our brains can also create space that separates us? To know the unknown, explore and create with others, feel like you matter, connect with others, to feel free and accomplish more with others than you can do on your own. These are the things of cultural intelligence. Cultural intelligence has scientific definitions, and we went through all those yesterday. But today we're going to focus on the stories. And so as we think about the stories, I want to also cue you all up to think about what we're going to be doing with all of these 2 days. Here's the outcomes, loosely framed at this point, we're hoping to achieve. Number one, we're going to be harnessing all of this information, and we're going to create a national storytelling scientific experiment. Can a story told across omni-channel platforms shift the narrative of the future of work toward a more human scale And if so, how? What does the data say about it? Working with economists to study externalities and how does that story shift? How has that impacted public health outcomes, firm profitability? National storytelling experiment. Number 2, we're going to use all of this information and in partnership with the Brain Capital Alliance and the European Mediterranean Economists Association, we're going to take all of this and develop a relationship between companies in Barcelona, Spain, and companies here in Denver. And we're going to develop residencies around creativity and science in both places. And then we'll move those forward together, working on innovation projects that companies are already working on. It's about bringing the creativity in a residency form to the innovation teams toward that innovation that they're already gearing towards. So those are the 2 main outcomes that we're going for. We'll be working more around that this afternoon. We have a short video that's going to play around What is an Artist by Natasha Tsakos, and then we're going to follow that up. And I know we're running about 5-10 minutes behind. We'll try to play catch up a little bit. Then after the video, we'll welcome our first presenter for the first section of the STAGE principles, social belonging and mental well-being. Josh Miller, be cued to come up after the video ends.
Hello, my name is Natasha Tsakos. Perfect timing. People describe me as an artist. I find the word too small, the position static. It's true, I sometimes enjoy it for the permission it gives me and the mystery of it. Because people don't really know what we do. It's like we're possessed by a magical force and make things. And no one talks about the people behind the scenes. There's a process. And everyone has it. Schizophrenic. Mine's a bit schizophrenic. I'd like to take you through it. The first part is great and terrifying because you're not really there. You might appear as though you're there, but everything important is happening in the background. While you're showering, making salad dressing, bicycling, your subconscious is assembling sounds, symbols, patterns, making associations you could never conceive of. And you're trusting it to filter through millions of bits of information for the purpose of delayed creative reaction. Alongside lives Madame Secretary. She sleeps with one side of the brain only, types with 2 fingers, takes record of anything interesting, and has strategically placed markers in the shower, light up pens by the bedside, Post-its in the kitchen, notepads by the couch, in the car, in the purse, and has mastered the art of emailing self. The secretary lives in a quantum state because the moment she captures the idea, the less she knows what it is. It's moved on. An idea is an arrested thought. The trick is to make it dynamic again. And the twins will do that. We'll get there. And so Madame Secretary will use substances like music, motion, meditation, Malbec in a desperate attempt to capture any stream of subconsciousness left. Once in a while, the fool comes knocking, reminding you this is all play, prompting, teasing, daring you to do this one thing radically differently. Try it, stretch it, flip it, bend it, twist it. Do the opposite. The fool encourages you to make mistakes and Once enough material has been filtered by the subconscious, compiled by the secretary, stirred by the fool, the twins step in. One thinks in sound, the other in form. Together, they take the notes and doodles and shape them, stage them, contextualize them. They give ideas rhythm, choreograph metaphors, and string concepts together to form new concepts altogether and pass it to the editor. We cut strings, times, come back, refine, sacrifices, good for great, great for better, better for excellence. The editor is never done. So the director takes over with a built-in simulation of an audience. Don't get me wrong, the director has a very clear point of view, a strong aesthetic, good instincts, a sense for the dramatic. Its superpower, however, is the ability to tap into other points of views, spatially and emotionally. They seem interconnected. And finally, in walks the artist, at the very end of the process, playing one role only. The title is too small, the position static, but mysterious. They'll take it. That ends the praise, the commentary, the questions. But the artist doesn't really know because the artist wasn't really there. The artist is the subconscious, the secretary, the fool, the twins, the editor, the director, the simulated audience, the summation of all the roles it embodies, the steps it takes methodically to get into a state of flow, the sensors it sharpens, the skills it's acquired, the real-time systems it has engineered for a very particular goal. We are never just one thing at any given point in time. And you know this. We are dynamic, as is the process. There is a method to the madness, as many ways as they are artists. In a time when technology is disrupting almost every industry, calculating at speeds beyond human comprehension, operating on cookie-cutter templates for the purpose of scalability, standing on the toupee of morally questionable value systems, where existential crises are unacknowledged and mismanaged, what do? I don't know. Why don't we start with where do we begin? By not overthinking it, by doing it, trusting
by
it,
getting out of our heads and into our bodies,
experimenting and improvising until we get it right.
Trust the
Guys,
process.
guys, it's not about the art or the artist. It's about the very steps that individual has taken through decades and decades of experimentation and validation that allows you to go beyond what you know. And chances are that place will be extraordinary.